Hello, it's Ian again, and it's been a while, so I've got lots to say. I had a very busy week last week, and that's one of the reasons why I'm giving you a bit of a vlog today. Lots to update you on. So firstly, Monday last week, I went to a training session with my good friend Salma. She's an ADI in the industry and she's been in it for a long time. I'm not going to give away her age by telling you how long, but she's been in it quite long. And she's a convert to coaching. And she's got the gift of the gab in such a lovely way, so I thought I'd give you some feedback on the course and what I took away from it. And yeah, a lot of it was really recapping a lot of the things I know, but there's a lot of changes happening within the industry, and Salma covered a lot of it, so I've got some of the notes here from there, and I'm not going to give too much away about the course, but it's really more to think about what the DSA Driving Standards Agency are doing to sort of update driver training. Now, we all in the industry, and a lot of you will recognise this, the Driving Standards Agency are quite reluctant to change, and there's a lot of negativity about them, but I think this is a really positive step forward for driver training. So I mean, we'll wait and see exactly what changes and how it pans out, but certainly from my perspective it's a good way forward. So first of all, we talked about national occupational standards, which are going to be implemented as part of the modernising driver training, and also part of the national driving standard, and also safe and responsible driving syllabus, which is all sort of part and parcel of the same thing as far as I understand it. Salma did explain it way better than I could, that one. But yeah, it's there's a lot to think about there. So some quite interesting stuff. I mean, essentially the key thing that they're doing is having a client-centered approach, so putting the student, it says here, maximising the learning by taking into account the status, prior experience and particular needs of the learner, which we should all have been doing in the first instance, really, and identifying the student's learning needs. Now, this is also going to be part of the new standards check, which I have the form here, and I have put a little bit on my blog about this already, but I know that some ADIs are either unaware of this, or if they are aware, you know, they may not be ready to deliver training in this way. And as an example, the first question on the new standards check form, which is going to be implemented in April 2014, is: did the trainer identify the pupil's learning goals and needs? So instead of saying, okay Jim, today we're going to be doing junctions, and then moving into sort of a briefing and moving on from that, it's more about saying, okay Jim, you know, what do you want to cover today? Or even if you've made an agreement that you might set the subject, it's actually turning around to Jim and saying, okay, so we're going to have a look at junctions today. How do you want to go about this? What is it you want to achieve from it? That sort of thing. And also finding out initially, you know, what do they already know? Now, there is a book, and I don't want to misquote it, but it's talking about learners training themselves, and this is very much in the style of what we're talking about in terms of knowing the prior knowledge of the student. A student, generally speaking, that's 17 has been sitting in a forward-facing seat since they were 3, probably, or probably even less than that, and watching parents, guardians, friends, family, whatever, you know, driving a vehicle. So they've got a pretty good idea as to how they deal with junctions, how they deal with roundabouts, and also at that point, of course, instilled in them is their beliefs and attitudes towards other road users, towards speed, towards safe driving, etc. So yeah, so anyway, that's going off at a slight tangent in terms of what we're talking about here. There's some absolutely excellent stuff in terms of what we talked about on the course. We talked a lot about coaching, which I feel I know a little bit about already. Certainly there's room for improvement, but one of the great things is the new syllabus. Well, say it's a new syllabus. This is, I could pretty much tick off on my syllabus, which I have down here, pretty much all of the things on this list. I mean, I'm sure there's things I could do better, but again, there's a lot that is missing on much of the syllabuses, which current driving instructors, driver trainers don't necessarily cover. So I'll give you an example here. We've got 4 key units that are covered in terms of safe and responsible driving syllabus. A learning outcome 1, be able to understand when you are physically and mentally fit to drive, know when you are not fit to drive, and make suitable decisions based on that understanding. So physically and mentally fit to drive. So we're talking about emotion, we're talking about physically fit, feeling tired mentally and physically. We're talking about if you had an injury, we're talking about changes in your life which might mean that you're getting older and you can't see so well. These are all things that they're getting drivers to reflect on. Absolutely spot on. That's exactly the route we should be taking. I do a lot of fleet work, and one of the key factors that comes up along with dealing with the role that people are in, sales jobs or what have you, is also about fitness to drive in terms of fatigue. So it comes on a little bit later on inside the syllabus, but yeah, it's a really important point. Understanding the act. Understand and act on a driver's responsibility to ensure that the vehicle is legally compliant. So we're talking about how you check your tyres, how you check underneath the bonnet, why you check them, how often you check them, the consequences of it, etc, etc, etc. How you make sure your vehicle's legally compliant. Do people know the day they pass the driving test? How do you go and tax the car? How do you go and insure the car? What about if I need to change my tyre? Where do I go? What do I do? What do I ask for? What size of tyre is it? How do I check my oil? Well, if it needs filling up, how do I do that? So it's going that little bit of an extra step further in terms of, well, for some instructors anyway, in terms of how that is delivered, and certainly there are certainly things that I could improve on. I have no doubts about that, but the detail in that's really key, so that people know what they're talking about. Next one, so be able to control the risks associated with carrying passengers, loads and animals. Absolutely. Now, whilst I was actually doing this video, I can see that my back seat belts aren't done up. I know I've got some weighty objects in the back, so I'm going to be doing, before I set off, popping the seat belts on the back seats to prevent things from coming forward. So yeah, hands up, there's something I could improve. But it's having that ability to assess that risk in the first place, having objects inside the interior of the car, making sure that they're safe, making sure people have got carrying passengers, the associated risks. So, talking to passengers, okay, we're all going to talk to them, but also what about if they're distracting you? What about if they're egging you on? What about peer pressure? All stuff that we should be talking in car at the very beginning of when we're learning to drive, all the way through to the very end of, or continuing throughout, to the 70, 80, 90, we should be talking about that with drivers. So yeah, absolutely. Carrying loads and animals, making sure that the loads are safe and all the rest of it. So yeah, all really good stuff. Details the important bit there. Be able to plan your journey using suitable transport. So we're talking about alternatives to driving vehicles, and absolutely. Using suitable transport, is the car a suitable thing to do a trip up to Manchester and back from here? Well, maybe not. It's probably better to take the train. It's just easier, less parking, less hassle, it's just quicker, etc. So it's about talking about that with people, and what other options are there. We don't always have to take the car. What about driving to the shops around the corner? Can we walk there? Can we get the bike, etc. So all really good stuff. Preparing the vehicle and its occupants for the journey planning. It's part of the GDE, the goals for driver education. So yeah, definitely. It's talked about in what we're going to talk about later on in terms of mind driving, in terms of making sure we are thinking about the journey and planning ahead for it. So absolutely cracking. Brakes and things like that. Guide and control the vehicle. Now this is what most instructors are pretty damn good at anyway, so we shouldn't have any major issues here. Treat the learning to drive process as an ongoing learning process, number one. That not necessarily the case, but in terms of coaching and reflection on driving, that's one of the things that the new standards checks talking about having that self-assessment ability to say, do you know what, that last drive wasn't that great. I need to try and plan ahead a little bit more. I was under pressure a little bit because of the time frame, so next time I'm going to make sure I leave more time for my journey when I know that's going to be the case. I was feeling a bit anxious about a job interview, or I was feeling a bit anxious about this, that and the other. Really important points, and it's saying that learning to drive is an ongoing learning experience. We don't stop learning. We don't. What a really dangerous belief, which is what we talk about a bit later on the mind driving, look at that on the next blog, is we learn to drive after we pass the driving test. Why does it have to be like that? Why can't we do realistic driving environment and situations before test? Why not? Why can't we get into that situation? I mean, the one reason obviously is we have to be accompanied by a supervising driver. Yes, absolutely, really important. So yeah, that's an important bit. But equally, you know, why can't we saying, okay, what would you normally be doing today, Jim? You know, would you be going up the shops or whatever? Let's go to the shops. Okay, multi-storey car park. Yeah, that's brilliant. That is. We're going to multi-storey car park. Really difficult situations to deal with. Okay, so you're going to be driving to Birmingham. Now, unfortunately, at this stage, we can't use the motorway, but what about if we plan another route? What about using the sat-nav? How are you going to plan to get there? So, yeah, lots and lots of things in terms of ongoing learning process. How can you continue learning? Could we be doing advanced tests? Could we be going and continuing to learn some theory? What about things like seminars and things like that? So, yeah, really important point there. Being able to start and move off and stop, this is the stuff that the instructors are good at. That's what's been absolutely hammered into them. It's a belief that that's the most important thing within the driving process, is that it's moving off and stopping. But it is important, but it's only part of the process. Being able to drive and manoeuvre the vehicle safely on different road surfaces and in different weather conditions. Again, this is one that isn't necessarily covered that well. It is with some instructors, but again, what about when it rains? Okay, so what do we mean by double stopping distances and how much are you leaving? What about escape routes? What about skidding? How do you control a skid? What's the causes of a skid? How can you prevent it? You know, what about driving smoothly? Different road surfaces and weather conditions. Turning your lights on. When you're turning the lights on, when you use fog lights, driving in the fog code, all that type of stuff. Knowing legal constraints that apply to the principles of towing a trailer or caravan safely and responsibly. Okay, so a little bit of a curveball there, because not necessarily everybody's going to be having to tow a trailer, but it's quite an important point that, do people understand the rules behind it? Do you know where to go to find that information out? What about towing a trailer? What are the difficulties when you've got other people on the road that are also doing that? So some really key points there. Guiding and controlling the vehicle. Yeah, absolutely. Driving in accordance with the highway code. Again, that's all part of the theory section, and it's sort of combined with treating the learning to drive as an ongoing process. So yeah, be able to negotiate the road safely, responsibly, and changing road and traffic conditions. How many drivers do you know that only a few years ago passed the driving test, but if you ask them road signs, you ask them what the speed limit is, they don't know? So there is still an issue there. There's still things to be working on. Complying with signals, signs, markings and traffic and calming measures. So yeah, absolutely. Active traffic management's fairly new. That should be covered. We should be talking about it. Even if we personally drive on the motorway, to show people those things, show a video of it, show pictures of it and discuss it, so we know what we're talking about. So yes, there are some gaps there, but that's generally what some instructors will tend to cover reasonably well anyway. And then the last one, and this is is it the last one? Let me just double check. I think it is. Yeah, the last one on here is drive safely and efficiently. Be able to interact appropriately with other road users and varying traffic conditions. So that's also, you know, being able to interact appropriately. So isn't that talking about driver behaviour, how you're dealing with that road rage situation or trying to prevent it in the first place? How you deal with a variety of traffic conditions. What about if it is very, very busy on the road and there's lots of traffic? What about when there's a traffic incident, etc., etc.? So all good stuff. Being able to minimise risk when driving in various road and traffic conditions. So minimise risk. So again, talking about escape routes, talking about defensive driving, talking about advanced driving, talking about positioning, view, getting the speed right for the situation and bend, etc. Know how to behave appropriately at incidents. Quite important words there. Again, knowing how to deal with an incident, trying to prevent it in the first place, obviously. But really good syllabus, and when you actually read the full thing, it goes into quite a lot of detail, you know, inside there, and it's really quite good. So I'm quite happy with that, and it was good to talk about it. But again, it talks. Salma's been very, very helpful because she's highlighted some of the sections. One of the ones I really like, which you would have pointed out inside the coaching and training session, is that it is your responsibility to take suitable action to lessen the risk, and it all talks about self-reflection, about you know, reflecting on your own driving, etc., etc. How to how to do that, how to go about it, talking about emotions, talking about how you deal with kids inside the car, talking about life-changing things when you have a new job, how does that affect your driving. All really good stuff that we should be covering in any case, and I hope that I cover 98% of that anyway, which I believe I do. So all really good stuff. And yeah, thank you very much, Salma. Obviously we covered a lot of coaching things as well. We talked about learning styles, we talked about the grow model, we talked about how we can coach each other, scaling, lots of different things that we can do to improve it. The key factor for me is putting the responsibility back on the driver to reflect on their own driving and say, do you know what, that wasn't very great, I need to decrease the risk there, I need to improve. And also about concentration levels, making sure you're focused on what you're looking at doing on the road, etc. So some really good stuff. I think for me it was more of a recap more than anything else. I think it was good to sort of have the time to sit down with other instructors and see their responses. Again, there was lots of different sort of instructors inside the room, coming from different backgrounds, etc. Some of them have heard of some of these things before, some of them all of it. Again, that's non-judgmental approach to it, because if you haven't, it's not your fault, it's not a problem. It's just really, it's a good thing that they were there to sort of pick up on it. So yeah, thank you very much, Salma. All good stuff. Highly recommend talking to her about some of the courses that she runs. I know that she also runs the BTEC in coaching as well, and that's the level 3, I believe, and there is a level 4. I know people that have done that and said it's very good. It's very deep. It's talking about psychology of driving, which is a really keen subject of mine. So yeah, definitely recommend all that. It's certainly something that I try and talk about already. I think there are limits to coaching. I think sometimes you do need to look at things in a slightly different way. Sometimes going back to a guided session where you talk someone through it. But again, it's about gaining trust with this client in order to ask them how you want to deliver a certain section. And in some cases, you know, how do you want me to do this? Well, can you guide me around it on the first occasion? No problem at all. Okay, so how do you want to do it on the second or third occasion? Okay, well, I'll back off a little bit and let you get on with it. What about trying it for yourself this time? And then saying, how did it go? What was good? What needed to improve? Where was it on a scale 1 to 10? All really important questions for them to reflect on it themselves, because once they've passed the driving test, hopefully that process will continue, and that's really the crux of it. So thank you very much. Any comments, let me know, and I'll be back with you very shortly, because I'm going to do another VBlog directly after this, talking about a training session we did later on inside the week last week. But thank you very much for listening.